Yep. Easy peasy.
Greg, how you doing?
Good, Frank. How are you?
Good.
Got a meeting coming up?
Yep.
Was at a conference with our friend from Mystic. She was down there.
I had her for lunch the other day.
Yeah.
It hasn't changed.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Wish you wouldn't be so unhappy all the time.
Oh, she was pretty gregarious the other day.
Yeah, she's always. Hey, Felicia.
Hey,
Hey,
Felicia, how you doing?
good. How's everyone?
Good.
Good.
Felicia, do you have the presentation or does Anthony?
Both. We both do.
Okay.
I have it up, so if I'm the one sharing screen, that is just fine. Like we might
It's 11, but let's give it a couple minutes. I think there are a few others that we're planning to join,
Okay, great.
like Anthony.
We need him.
Felicia, did you talk to him this morning?
No,
Coming in now.
he just joined.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where'd he go?
Here he is.
Hey, Jason.
What's on your hat,
Morning,
Anthony?
everyone.
What's on your hat, Anthony?
Well,
Okay.
long as it's not the Detroit Lions.
Oh,
Hey,
man.
hey. Hey.
Oh, that was a
That was-
heartbreaker.
I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Turned it off. Went to bed 9 o'clock. Figured better read a book about naval history than that.
Well, I grew up in Detroit, so
Oh.
I'm lifelong sufferer of the
my
Lions not
Lord.
quite living up to expectation. But
That was brutal.
yeah. So a little after 11. Why don't we just go ahead and get started? So there you go, Aaron. Again, I'm Rob Cred. I'm the director at the Connecticut Museum of Culture and History. And just as a reminder, Frank Burns and I are co-chairs of this particular committee. So the intent of the meeting today, more than anything, is to bring everyone up to speed. It's a new year, and I unfortunately missed the last Connecticut 250 meeting, but I think there's been some activity and some work has occurred. And so, again, the intent is to bring everybody up to speed with what's been happening so far. And so I think either Felicia or Anthony are going to share their screen and walk through a brief presentation, and then we can have an opportunity for some Q&A.
Felicia, would you mind?
Of course, happy to. Well, hold on, gotta get my buttons to show here. Okay. Share screen.
Actually, one thing while we're waiting on this, I think we have one new member who we have not, at least I haven't seen here, is our good buddy, James Fowler at Deep. James, you wanted to say hello really quick?
Absolutely, Anthony. Hi, everyone. I'm James Fowler. I work for the commissioner at Deep, primarily in outreach and engagement and our marketing initiatives. So I've had the pleasure of working with Anthony on a number of things, including the launch of ctparks.com, our new shining parks website that we're really looking forward to take advantage of, and it's great to be here.
Yeah,
Welcome.
I say this not just because James said some nice things about me just now, but I think James is one of the true untapped talents in state government. I'm really excited that he's here and working with us. I think he's one of the few people that if I were to ever leave, I would entrust my job to. So I'm really happy that he's joined us, and I think he'll be an asset to our efforts moving forward.
Fantastic. All right. Okay, Anthony, do you want to do the budget slide and I'll do the website slides?
Yeah, I think that works. I think between me and Frank and you and Rob, we can all talk through this. And Rob, once I'm done with this marketing piece, I think, you had mentioned you wanted to talk about some of the other budgetary pieces and how it complements these efforts. So I'll
Sure.
toss over to you.
Yeah.
But so after, multiple times going back and forth internally and not just throwing numbers out there to see what sticks, but rather thinking about this from a programmatic sense. What is the smart way to structure our marketing strategies and how we actually execute this plan statewide? We came to these numbers. And so from a general marketing, so there are two buckets. You can look at this: general and matching grants. And the general is how we, from a high funnel standpoint, market Connecticut as a place to celebrate the 250th. The matching grants will be used a little bit more low funnel for different efforts and using it both as a carrot to get people to to utilize our standards and our suggestions and our marketing materials, but also to get them putting together events and actually doing, again, the day-to-day boots on the ground work of America 250 on this local level. So general through the years will increase leading up to 2026, and then slowly but surely start to ramp down. After 2026, we do have money because there are events, part of the revolution that occurred after. So we don't want to go completely dark after that 250th anniversary on July 4th. But, again, it's important that we maintain some level of general marketing and advertising. And then the matching grants slowly but surely ramp up. And what we'll be doing with these matching grants for marketing, one-to-one matching, is distributing them throughout the state to local partners at the regional chamber level and allowing them to distribute those to applicants. And these are things like events. These are things like websites. These are things like regional marketing plans. All of those would be valuable. And so, you're only going to get it, though, if you bring money to the table and you have skin in the game. And I think that is in the vein of what this administration is trying to do in getting private partners to step up to the plate to work with the government. So those public-private partnerships are hugely valuable. So subtotal 2023 and 2024, the year ahead is $1 million. 24 to 25 is 6. 25 to 26 is 8.5, which is our high water mark. 26 to 27 is 5 million, and then last year would be 500,000. And slowly but surely, kind of, take that out. And I think some of these fees would, would probably involve low, but certainly some administrative costs for our regional partners as they administer grants. So anything you want to add on to that, Frank, before we toss it over to Rob?
No, I think that kind of sums it up. I do have a meeting with Joanna Bond on Thursday.
Great.
She's taken over the lead for the Metro Chambers. Tony Sheridan is stepping down. So I hope to be able to work with her and talk a little bit about where we're suggesting that particularly matching grants be kind of administered through perhaps the Metro Chambers. And they in turn could filter them down to the local chambers. So I'll let you know how that turns out. Okay.
Great. Any questions on that?
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Felicia. Perfect. I was asked the same question. Cool. I'm going to toss it over to Rob really quick. Rob, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the other pieces of the overall budget?
Yeah. And certainly Cindy and Jason have done a lot of work on this, but I wanted to make sure that this committee is aware that in addition to the numbers that you see, and Cindy, there you go, look at that. It's like we rehearsed this. That was good. So I think it's important that the arts and culture piece is also highlighted in addition to the marketing piece. And so you can see that subtitle over the 5-year period is looking at $14.6 million for arts and culture. And some of this is re-granting funds. And I think that Connecticut Humanities is well established in terms of managing competitive grants. And I believe that in addition to that, there's some capacity building that's built in over the years. And my feeling is that what's important about this whole package is the partnership between arts and cultural organizations and tourism. And so one of the things I've pointed out a couple of times that in working on this at a national level, I've become aware that one of the outcomes of the bicentennial in 1976 is that about 30 to 40% of the history museums that exist today were formed in and around the bicentennial. And that's one of the legacies from 50 years ago. And one of the things that I hope will be a legacy of America 250 is a stronger partnership between arts, culture, and tourism. I'm in the arts and culture industry, and we tend to focus on programs and content, and perhaps not enough on getting the word out about what it is that we do. And so, again, I hope that Connecticut 250, America 250 is going to be an opportunity for us to strengthen that partnership, and hopefully it'll be long lasting after that. Just a couple of other quick points about other kinds of activity in terms of potential funding. I'm working with a group of individuals that are part of a national association that is called the American Association for State and Local History. And we are working with a lobbyist to see if we can increase the amount of funding from the federal government for programs and activities at the grassroots level, at the museums and cultural organizations around the country through funding through some existing systems that you are all probably aware of, like the National Endowment for the Arts, National Endowment for the Humanities, the National Park Service, as well as the Institute for Museum and Library Services. So I just wanted to make sure that this committee knows that we're not just depending 100% on local or state funding, but I think that America 250 really holds an opportunity for things to happen across the country. And the last thing I'll say is that there was a gathering in Williamsburg last March. There will be another gathering this year. Last year, there were 34 states represented in Williamsburg, and it's kind of a bit of more of a grassroots level. America 250, the national umbrella organization, is not responsible for a lot of the programming. They'll do some of the bigger commemorative sorts of events and tactics, while getting funding for what's happening in communities, I think is really important. There were 34 represented last year. I think today there are over 44 states that have commissions, and the group is gathering again in Williamsburg in March. And I think it's an opportunity for us in Connecticut to share information with our colleagues and to learn from what it is that they're doing. So all of this is important, but I think that having the finances or having the income to be able to do programs and let people know about them will be very important for the 250th.
One other comment I'd like to make, the budget that we've kind of shared with the group, if anybody has any ideas or suggestions, now would be the time. Step forward and share them with us. We don't want to go to the governor's office or the legislature and keep changing the numbers. So again, please take a look at it. If it's something that you're all comfortable, if you could get back to Rob and myself and let us know, that way we can kind of move forward.
I'd like to scratch a little bit of an itch here and pick at the intersection of our work. I think, you know, I'm coming at it. I think like Rob and I have had these conversations and thinking about Connecticut stories. And this is we're asking for a newer investment in Connecticut around the story of America 250. But I am wondering, and this might be more for Anthony and Felicia, what do other states invest in their stories? What does Massachusetts invest? What does Pennsylvania invest? Not 250th investments, but like Boston builds an economy around the Freedom Trail, right? Pennsylvania, Philadelphia have their story. Virginia has their story. And there's a lot of dollars committed to this storytelling that attracts visitors. We don't do any of that. Or if we do, it's on a microscopic level in comparison. What could that look like? I mean, and this is really where I think the information you could bring to us in the sort of history and heritage arena could help us hone what stories do we need to pick at and tell and invest in and drive people to. You know, whether it's the story of the Ashbow brothers at Mohegan, whether it's, you know, the different story like the Battle of Ridgefield and Keeler Tavern. You know, these are little local stories that have a much larger narrative that we could really envelop in the stories that we can and should be telling that attract a lot of people. So I'd love to talk a little bit about that without getting hyper granular, but I think information that you could bring to us might help us to sort of build a stronger argument for a higher level of investment. And the 250th would present sort of a justifying narrative to make an initial real investment. But then I fear, as Anthony was talking about, you know, we sort of taper off towards 2028, when in fact we might want to be ramping up because we've got a whole we've got 8 years of anniversaries of revolutionary events in Connecticut. The Declaration of Independence is one moment, but we've got 8 years after that we could be telling stories about making these investments in. So I'd love to have a little conversation around that and see where this might go.
So I think you make a very valid point, Jason. And I think to answer your question more directly about what are the stories and the investment, I can't quite pinpoint the individual investments other states are making on that level. But I think to answer your question, like I said directly, I think this is a strategic question that we need to be answering, not just us at COT, but us as a state as a whole. My gut tells me right now, and where we've been doing with our whole rebrand efforts, I think we need to be less granular. I think we need to be getting away from this small town and regional focus and start thinking of ourselves as players on a national scale. So like individual small little battles are less important, as opposed to how did this, let's just say hypothetically, for the sake of this conversation, how did this impact the outcome of the war? How did these historical and heritage type of developments impact the development of New England, of the East Coast, of the United States, of the world? I think that is the type of thing we need to be thinking about from a storytelling standpoint, and stop thinking of ourselves as this middle child between New York and Massachusetts and start thinking of ourselves as swinging for the fences, because realistically, our story is just as powerful as anybody else's.
Yeah.
So if we do that, no offense to Ridgefield and the battle that may have happened there, but I think it's too small potatoes for the sake of this much larger thing that we're trying to do. So yes, we should be doing that, but like, how are these? We have to ask ourselves this question. This is kind of our North Star. How are these things that are happened during the revolution how did it influence Connecticut's history and America's history over the last 250 years, and how is it influencing going forward? So, like, for example, like thinking about maybe some culinary developments that happened 250 years ago. How did that influence the way our culture is today? So getting to heritage. So what is the thing that it influences today, and how does it want to influence how we're marketing Connecticut moving forward? So, like, I think there's a rich story to tell about oysters in Connecticut historically, and that then ties into what it is we're trying to do to market Connecticut oysters on the national scale as one of the best in the United States. So that's just one very, skimming the surface. I'm trying to give less abstract examples to everybody, but I hope that more directly answers the question.
If I can, toss in for a second, I'm to represent the small annoying stories of not really world changing events, and owning 12 of those properties. I think one of the key things is, like, how do we, sure, you can talk to me, I can make changes for our 12 properties, and that's a little bit easier. But if we're talking about, let me just, I'll pick on somebody like Lebanon Historical Society or one of these kind of places, getting them to think in that worldview or that much larger way is going to be difficult. They need $1,000 to put on the exhibit about their local hero who did this one thing. And just putting that as a balance. I'm not saying your thoughts are out there or anything like that. I generally would agree, but I do think that there is also that balance. I mean, again, I know I've said this too many times, but doing that War of 1812 stuff down in Maryland was very much a case in finding a way to tell a statewide story while also trying to appease those folks who are super hyper local focused. And getting that balance right is probably next to impossible, but we just need to be able to have an angle that we can give to local people to say, this is how you're involved, whether it's just on calendars or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think
Put that out there.
the answer to that ends up going back to the whole idea of the carrot, which those matching grants will help us do. So if someone were to be able to get these grants, what we are able to do is saying, okay, if you're going to put some money on the line and we're going to give you this grant, let's think about this a little bit differently. So I think from our part, both as an office, but also as a committee here, we need to be both educating and engaging people to start thinking about it a little bit differently. So it's like, so to go to your one example about Lebanon and the Historical Society, I am sure that we can make an argument that that individual played a much bigger role than anybody, like had a much bigger ripple effect than anybody might expect. So it's like, well, yes, hey, you don't exactly think of this on a much bigger scale. There's got to be a story that we're telling on how that it goes further beyond that. It's just, it's, I'm not saying we change history. I'm saying we maybe tell history in a little bit of a different way. No,
well, I would say that we might want to sort of, this might be the team or part of the team that helps shape more of a master narrative of what do we want to communicate to the wider world. But to Aaron's organizations and others like them, how do they filter up into that story?
I think that's
so we need to create that stratigraphy to get from one to the other. But if they can't point in a direction because we're not giving it to them, then we're stuck. So I think it's up to us.
Yeah, I'm sorry to jump in. I think, like, I get what you're saying. And I guess I always try and explain things to myself in a very simple way. So this is less for you guys and more for me. So I think what you're saying is, like, maybe these individual stories don't have a bigger impact directly, but if they can all group together and not be isolated, how, like, together they make that bigger ripple effect. Like, all of them together had a great output on the outcome of the war, and maybe it influenced innovation and creativity and all these other pieces.
Exactly. They're illustrative.
Yeah. I mean, I think ultimately what I'm saying here is, I think, like, we all have to start thinking of ourselves as, it's less one-offs and part of a bigger output.
Yeah. So Felicia had her hand
Yeah.
up. a bit.
Yeah, so here's the great news that also contributes to Jason's original question, and that is like, how do we know which stories to invest more in? So as we craft all of these stories, and some of them ladder up to a bigger theme, perhaps maybe some of them are micro stories about one particular battle. What's great is that our most effective and efficient tactic for getting people to the state is content marketing. And in that content marketing, we can tell the stories big and small, and then the market tells us what they're most interested in. We get the data immediately. This story is hitting, it's competing with this story, the story's not hitting. And that's how we learn where the passion is, what's going to get people to, to believe our story, whether it's a big one or a small one. I would agree that mostly we can control that they ladder up to a bigger story. But what's great is that the data is there. We will have immediate data by putting out these stories. And then we can reinvest in the stories that are hitting.
Right.
So is that, and again, I'm exactly what I was thinking. What you're saying, Felicia, is that point, do we start putting stories together that can sort of look to sort of framework? Like I look at the zoo again, it's my job over here. And I look at the two things that in this time period, they had the turtle, which was the submarine that was built in Old Saybrook, which I could do the turtle with turtles at the zoo. There's the bullfrog war over in Willimantic. I can do the bull amphibian thing with that. Is that the kind of connectivity we're trying to do? And then we're trying to build a framework around the whole thing. So we start
That's
here.
actually really interesting, Greg.
Huh?
It's a really interesting connection you're making, but I would love to see something like that.
I think connections like that is what we are. I think a lot of us are good at doing those connections, those partnerships. So I can partner with, I think we have the turtle on display in Milford, I believe. So it's, again, there's those cross pollinations that we can have, pun intended. But again, I'm thinking, how do we get to that accumulation, that one thing? Still revolutionary. No, that's not the.
So one of the things I learned is that in 1976 with the bicentennial, it was really New England, East Coast centric, and the rest of the country really wasn't a part of it. And so as I talk to colleagues around the country, it's with these larger themes, the larger themes like liberty, freedom, civic engagement. I think that North Dakota, South Dakota is seeing that they can plug into that, they can participate with those larger themes, and not to hit our audiences with too much heavy stuff. I mean, liberty, freedom, and civic engagement, I think, obviously are still relevant today. And I think what we'd like to see is a balance between programs that really explore these untold stories, or the themes that I think the Connecticut Commission has developed are important as well, and have a balance between the fireworks and parades and hot dogs and mom and apple pie, and being able to tell some of these other kinds of stories that are more of a whole history that's being told.
I think what we're doing here is something that we should all also be advocating for, is infrastructure building. Like, I want to go to what Greg is talking about, partnerships. I mean, the one thing I have noticed in 3 short years of living in Connecticut is how isolated so many people are in this state, despite being small. And we can use this as both an incentive and a method of bringing people together to work as one, as opposed to isolated members. And then we can have a much bigger impact if everybody is moving in the same direction.
Any other comments? I mean, I think Felicia was going to talk a little bit more about the website, but before we leave this, I wanted to give people a chance
I think this is good discussion. It's something that committee should consider at a future meeting.
Which part?
Everything we just talked about.
Okay, Felicia.
Yeah. Okay. Let me. So we only have 3 minutes left in our time. Are we all able to go over, or?
Yeah, we can go.
Okay. Great. Okay. So so talking just about the website. So to give you a foundation of where we've been with this planning, have worked with Cindy particularly about the input and the needs and the functional spec of what we're going to need to do, and have put together, it's sort of like building a house. You know, how much does it cost and how long does it take to build a house? Well, there are a lot of details that need to go into what kind of house, what size of house, and how is it built. So we have done a lot of that planning. We have talked about what kind of website, what does it need to do, and how does it need to be built to be most efficient. So some of the assumptions that have gone into it so far is that it would be a subset of ctvisit.com for two major reasons. The first being that if the database is shared, all data entry for the events and the listings will be shared between CTVisit and the CT250 sites. That is a massive amount of efficiency for all who are going to participate. And then the other big reason is that there's shared traffic. So all exposure that goes to CT250 will also have exposure to CTVisit and vice versa. Particularly powerful since CTVisit has already 9.4 million visits to it. So there's, you know, a guaranteed traffic base already. So great things. And then of course, all of the events and content that are to CT250 will also be circulating on CTVisit. So it's just a great synergy. We've assumed that the page layouts will be similar, but branded as America 250, that there would be a separate architecture and navigation, but access to the CTVisit navigation. This is because the hierarchy of information architecture needed for CT250 is unique to CT250. It does not match the CT tourism architecture. We are planning a consumer-facing experience, and then as I was working with Cindy, and there's a lot of needs on the industry-facing side of things too, so a separate interface for the industry section. And then there would be opportunity for lots of content, and the content can be owned and earned meaning we can use press and put that press content into the experience of the website, but also all of the owned, meaning everything that we all create. And as you guys have been talking about the different stories that you are interested in testing, especially if we, you know, coordinate how those feel, we can put lots of content up here. With content marketing, more is more. So it is, you know, fantastic if each of you want to contribute the stories that you're passionate about, and maybe there would be, with Anthony's help, some unifying of how those feel or what they ladder up to, but lots of different stories can be told. I've made a list of some of the inclusions that were part of the requirements. So those are the general assumptions. And then the timeline for creating that within the CTVisit subsite experience environment would have us launching around August. So any questions or wishes or thoughts? Go back to the inclusion slide.
So Felicia, we're in ongoing discussions here with Cindy and trying to finalize this final plan.
Yes, I mean, I took her input, and this is the first, you know, kind of
Draft.
General framework of what it would include. I have a far more detailed version of this that, you know, I can walk through with anyone that wants to. It's super tedious about, you know, how it's built and what points where, et cetera. But this is kind of the top line of the experience that's at this point been considered.
I'd love to see that offline at some point.
There have also been a couple of things that are already sacrificed along the way, like wishes that would simply be perhaps irresponsibly expensive to consider, and I can go through those at some point too. But this is kind of based on what makes sense.
Any questions for Felicia? Anthony, any comments or thoughts?
No, I have none. I mean, I think the big thing here is just making sure that everyone is aligned with the strategy. And then I think we can nuance out the actual tactics and the stories, you know, together as a committee.
Okay.
Sounds great.
Anything else? Questions or comments?
I think we're good.
Well, this was meant to be bring people up to speed. So I think we've accomplished that today. I just want to thank everybody for taking the time, and we'll continue the conversation. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you.
Care.